All right, let's get started. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in today. It's an exciting topic that we have brought for you. Uh, in terms of introduction, I am the founder and the CEO of Benori, and along with me today, my partner in crime is Dolly Matthews. Dolly is an associate vice president at Benori, and she leads our consumer goods and especially foods and beverages practice. She comes with a wealth of experience of more than a decade and a half in the space. The topic for today is really F&B in transition in the Middle East. The sector has undergone dramatic changes over the last decade, especially. But if you look back on it over the last 5.5 decades, it has continuously evolved, and the dynamics of the sector, the competition in the sector, and the opportunities in the sector have been ever evolving. So today's topic is really around trying to understand what all is happening, and then how does one navigate risks and unlock growth in the Middle East in this sector. So we are going to do this as always. What happens in Benori webinars? There are going to be three parts to the webinar. I will take everybody through, an understanding of what is happening. What is the transition all about? Where are we coming from in the sector in the Middle East? Where are we most likely going? The participants, the ecosystem, the influencers, the government, consumers, investors, all of them, how does one think about this massive disruption which is happening, and at the same time, the significant opportunities are coming up? How do we understand that? After my presentation and thoughts, I will hand it over to Dolly, who would make sense of what should all of you do about this, and how can potentially Benori help. And then towards the end of the webinar, we will just pick up questions. So my request would be that as we are going through this, please keep on typing out your questions in the Q&A window, and we will try and pick up as many of those as possible. Now, let's quickly get into the first topic, which is my part of the webinar. So this slide actually talks about how this entire sector has evolved since 1970. So we have divided this up into four phases. From the 1970s to 2000, it was basically the transition from being a welfare state oriented sector to modernization. So whether it was the extended reliance on imports, the urbanization moves, which were fueled by the oil wealth which got created. And obviously, that led to modernization in the retail sector. There was some amount of local industry scale up, and that got accelerated maybe in the 90s as there was more Western influence coming into the Middle East, and especially the UAE, around fast food chains which were entering. Convenience foods became more important with the expat population, and especially with working women. So all of that led to more modernization of the sector. However, once we got into this 21st century, the first 15 years was all about globalization and diversification. Clearly, tourism and premiumization was a big driver of the hospitality boom, especially in Dubai, leading to fine dining and premium imports. The whole issue of food security after the global economic crisis in 2007, and the requirement for the region taking on halal leadership, which led to governments in the Middle East acquiring assets, farm and land assets overseas, and also the GCC emerging as a certification hub. Clearly, there was a lot of retail and consumption shifts. Private labels grew. Soft drink consumption scaled up rapidly, and clearly there were significant expansion in the retail formats, modern retail and high-end luxury retail and so on. At the same time, there were massive movements in technology and agri-tech startups, hydroponics, greenhouse farming, and so on. The last 10 years, these trends got accelerated, and especially with the COVID era of those few years, there was a lot of panic in the supply chains. There was a lot of strain in the supply chains. And then uh, collectively as humanity, I think everybody moved towards health and how could food and your diet help with that. So there was a big awareness building which happened on the entire planet around the correlation between health and food, which led to a lot of preferences of consumers getting changed. Uh, and then, governments obviously started reacting by putting in sugar taxes. Companies started reacting by having reformulations in their portfolios, and the wellness industry took off big time. At the same time, because everybody was working on the cloud and digitally accessing everything for those 1 or 2 years, there was a massive acceleration on the digitization, whether it was e-commerce, cloud kitchens, delivery platforms, and so on. At the same time, the whole advent of AI in logistics, in the supply chain, and so on took off big time. And then, given the COVID crisis and the psychological shock that everybody felt, there was obviously a deep desire on the part of governments, and especially one where their own country was dependent on imports to expand massively the food reserves. Um, Going forward, it is all going to be about 2025 and beyond, about innovation, localization, and sustainability. Whether it's cloud kitchens, delivery, food delivery scale ups, convenience-driven models, is starting to play a big role, whether it's in the form of packaging or the halal traceability and things like those. Regional F&B brands are coming up big time, and this trend is only going to gain more momentum. And clearly, as I mentioned, the wellness part of it, plant-based proteins, functional foods, and of course, sustainability. Did you know that collectively in the food sector in UAE and the kingdom, there has been about a $1.3 billion investment, which is VC investment, not sovereign funds, not private equity, but VC investments. There is expected to be an eightfold growth between now and 2030 in plant-based the meat market from 60 million to about half a billion. 85% of KSA's food processing is supposedly going to be localized by 2030. The KSA already has self-sufficiency in dairy and poultry eggs. And if you look at mobile food delivery apps, there is a 30% year-on-year growth, which is happening. We at Benori ran a quick survey over the last few weeks in preparation for this webinar, where consumers in UAE were asked about their evolving food choices, purchasing behavior, their perspectives on sustainability, and so on. The findings of these were very interesting, although not very surprising. So, the first question we asked really was around, is there a preference for locally produced food products over imported ones? And if you look at these results, 52% have a preference for locally produced food items. 28% do not have a preference, which means that they're okay with locally produced ones or imported ones, and only 20% had imported, preference for imported food items. Then, when we ask them what is driving your sort of preference for locally produced food products, needless to say, quality and freshness was the biggest driver of this. 90% of the respondents said that there's this is fresher food and the quality is better. Then, of course, there were feedback on food safety and standards. And then, of course, if you are buying locally produced food, it is supposedly healthier. So people have a preference for that. So this local first mindset is reshaping choices, is reshaping consumer behavior, and accordingly opportunities for businesses and governments to further this. Further, we asked about the preferred channel for UAE consumers to buy food and grocery items. 65% are now preferring to buy from supermarkets, hypermarkets. 65% really prefer the e-commerce channel. Increasingly, quick commerce is becoming important, 55%. And unfortunately, the local neighborhood stores are going out of vogue. On the food delivery side, very interesting insights here. At least 75% or three-fourths of the people surveyed are getting food ordered once a week, at least, overall. So clearly, the way consumers are buying, the channels they are preferring, and the use of technology is a big driver in all of these trends that we are seeing. Similarly, I won't go through the details here, but healthy fortified food for consumers, almost 80% said that this is becoming very important to somewhat important. And 19% are neutral, which means that they are not against it. People are in general willing to pay a premium also. And only 3% said that they don't really care whether it's fortified or not fortified. And the next question sort of also showed towards the health part of it, but also the diet preferences that people are having. 40% of the respondents are saying that they are shifting more towards vegan and vegetarian. And then, of course, 25% are flexitarian. Some other insights that came out were around sustainability and the emotional appeal that brands can have through their advertising and their messaging and their brand positioning. So people would are willing to pay a premium for sustainable uh, packaging that is used in food products, and at the same time they feel proud and they feel positive and they have a positive emotional response towards a brand that on its packaging can talk about things like the recycling initiatives that company is taking and so on. So if you really look at it, the four major shifts or the four major trends or drivers overall of the sector that are changing the industry as such. One is shift towards localization, the requirement for resilience in the supply chain, because there is that COVID shock is still there in people's memories. So people want resilient supply chains. The massive acceleration of digital and omni-channel food service models, the fortification of nutrition, functional foods, and then of course the whole issue around sustainability, eco-friendly packaging, and food waste reduction. So the ecosystem, if you look of the industry, is really around five participants, five players. These are the food manufacturers, the retailers, the food service operators, technology and agri-tech providers, and of course the infrastructure providers for the industry. And the big drivers of the behavior of all of these participants in the ecosystem are, of course, the consumers, the governments, and you cannot leave the investors out of anything. So they are obviously influencing a lot of decisions. Just very quickly, if we look at the first big issue around advancing food security and localization, as we had seen in the survey, 52% of UAE consumers are willing to opt for local food options. Similarly, the governments have an incentive to promote this. So by 2051, UAE is targeting 50% local production. And then when you look at the investors, the total investments in the GCC for food security is about $30.5 billion so far, and lots more is to come. Now, clearly, these kind of trends and so on are going to impact the various participants of the industry, whether it's technology and agri-tech providers. There is a doubling of vertical farming market, which is expected. Blockchain traceability solutions, IoT solutions are being adopted big time, and there are a lot of opportunities coming up. The cold storage industry, the construction market for that is growing at about 15-16% a year with warehouses and hubs. And when that cold chain appears or gets promoted, then the food manufacturers obviously have to react because they might be buying ingredients or grains which have been refrigerated. So in their own manufacturing process, they would have to incorporate lots of different things. Similarly, if we look at food delivery, that entire industry, consumers 70% food delivery transactions in the UAE and Saudi are now on mobile devices. The Saudi government is basically saying that 70% cashless transactions target is there by 2030. And of course, there is this example of this company, Delivery Hero, which did this massive IPO and got this very attractive valuation. So clearly, of these trends have major implications for the food service providers because this trend of ordering on mobile will only keep on going up. So, How do you think about apps? How do you think about loyalty platforms? The food manufacturers have to cater their manufacturing process to their market, which increasingly are cloud kitchens where there is variability of demand, peak loads, and things like those. And the technology providers across the value chain, whether it's POS integrations, demand forecasting tools, and so on, have to be integrated into the entire value chain. Similarly, if you look at healthier plant-based foods, there is a requirement for innovation. There is a requirement for portfolio revamp. 80% of UAE consumers are more health conscious now. Government is giving grants for R&D and fortified plant-based products. And clearly, investors are also investing in this sector. So food manufacturers have to figure out how to come up with new products which are fortified. Retailers are giving already more shelf space. So they are promoting healthier foods. And there are different kinds of, uh, their own sort of promotions, in-store promotions that they are doing. And finally, with food service operators, 65% of UAE consumers viewing plant-based meals as healthier. So the menus and what is on offer by food service operators has to cater to this demand. I won't spend too much time on this, and I should really wrap this up because I've taken about 20 minutes. Uh, so, there is a big move towards single-use plastic ban. So clearly, food manufacturers have to figure out how to deal with this. Retailers, especially with their private label brands, have to deal with this. And then, of course, the food service operators, given that there's more sustainable packaging required, have to deal with this via higher meal prices or some other strategies. So, if you put all of this together, then what are the key questions that governments, investors, manufacturers, and so on have to answer? So we have just put out some high-level questions here. So in terms of governments, clearly, how do you create a more attractive investment environment? How do you facilitate technology adoption and modernization? How do you reduce food import dependency? Investors, clearly, the classical questions around whenever an industry is in flux and in changing very rapidly, and technological disruptions and demand profile disruptions, competition, markets, international players, globalization, returns, technology adoption, and so on, has to be answered. For operators, for food manufacturers, what do you do? How do you meet unmet demand? How do you reformulate your legacy SKUs? What do you do about your marketing and distribution strategy? What do you do about your omni-channel strategy? What do you do about customer behavior? And so on, right? And then importers and distributors have a set of questions that they need to figure out. And similarly with retailers and food service operators. Sorry. So with this, let me hand it over to Dolly. Dolly, if you can please pick it up from here.
Sure. Thanks, Ashish. So, of course, I mean, as Ashish talked about, very high level trends or themes based on which the entire transition is happening. And then here at Benori, and in this webinar, we're going to kind of allude to the various factors which you can look into in terms of assessing your growth and navigating the risks that are there. So if we move on to the next slide, what we've done is we've put together seven major pillars that should be looked into while you're looking or to unlock growth in this market. Of course, the market dynamics is very important. So looking at, various categories, channels, the demographic shifts, and continuously monitoring them. How are the consumer dynamics changing, be their sentiments, be their preferences. Certainly competition plays a very critical role, one in terms of knowing what their strengths are, but at the same time also knowing what they are not offering, and is that an opportunity enough for you to capitalize. Of course, all of this alludes to the cost efficiency, how well and how robust your supply chain is, and how profitable the entire journey is. And on top of it, definitely the regulatory compliance, because the regulations are evolving at a very rapid pace. And of course, government is also taking a lot of initiatives within this space and providing a lot of incentives. So we'll deep dive into each of these pillars and see, kind of give you a glimpse of how we at Benori have helped various clients in this journey and how you can leverage us. So if we move on to the next slide, which is on market dynamics, I mentioned that, we have to look at certainly the market size, the growth rates, the potential of the categories, identify the white spaces, and continue to monitor this. And wherein we have this case study, if we look at it. So here the scenario was one of our clients, they wanted to expand a specific food commodity in the adjoining areas of Middle East, right? And they wanted to assess which particular market is suitable for that food commodity, wherein we kind of looked at the supply demand scenario as to what is the domestic production, how much is being imported, that food category is being imported, and what is the consumption pattern. And with these analysis, we were able to prioritize the markets which our clients should go after in terms of pulling out or growing their presence in the regions, in the neighboring regions. Similarly, if we look at the next scenario or the next pillar, which is more around consumer, of course, we all know that, we need to understand the consumer pain points, the sentiments, and, what kind of trends are ongoing, considering that all of us are now hooked on to social media and the global trends are kind of regional trends also. So here we have a case study wherein, our customer was looking at, okay, tell me about the consumer sentiments, but we are particularly interested in understanding what they are writing on digital platform, be a social media or an e-commerce platform. Often a lot of consumers have started posting reviews of all the products that they have explored, right? And here we were able to share the sentiments of a brand, what the consumer is talking about. And this helped our client in changing their communication and marketing efforts so as to take up the reviews from the consumer as a feedback. And this was a continuous process wherein we also analyzed this in a 6 monthly frequency to see how it has shifted based on the communication and the marketing shift changes that they have done. Moving on to the third pillar, which definitely is the competition. It is very important to know about your local competition, but at the same time, knowing the GCC region, it is also important to know what the global players are offering, because they're always on a lookout to see what would sell in this region. Certainly, knowing the current offerings in the market, and also looking out what could be the potential collaborations or partnerships that can happen for an inorganic growth within this space. So here we have a very interesting example wherein the client was more of a manufacturer of a product which is very heavily reliant on import. Now, the question there was, what is it that the current players are offering within this space, and what are the global players offering, so that accordingly I can put together, I as client can strategize within this space. So we did a very in-depth profiling of the players, understood what kind of distribution strategies do they have, where are they procuring their material from, what is the kind of clientele that they have, and what is their entire distribution network. So that's the depth we can go into in terms of assessing how your competition is playing, what is the strength that they have, and what is the niche that you can carve out. Moving on to the fourth pillar, which is around supply chain and operational resilience. Of course, considering that the market is import driven, it is very, very important to understand what could be your source of the raw material. It could be either a global diversification or a local diversification that can happen. Of course, maintaining the inventory strategically, that's very important. But at the same time, looking at technology to attain more efficiency in the entire supply chain is also very critical. Now, if we look at the case study, so here we see, with the rise in the digital business models, particularly your dark stores and autonomous store, here the request from the client was on identifying what exactly is the business model that is being followed, especially within dark stores and autonomous warehouses. We were able to carve out the entire process as to how it functions, the various impact that it can have, and this kind of enabled our client to identify the right model for themselves, and also the impact that they would have if the model is adopted. Moving on, again, talking about the financial and the growth stability, which of course is very, very critical. And here, identifying or optimizing your price models, creating a balance between the marketing spends and the trade spends, and of course, also identifying which channel is the best, because previously we saw that there is a rise in e-commerce and quick commerce. So is that really going to bring any growth contribution to your business? Or amongst all the channels, what is the growth contribution of each of these channels, right? So we were able to do a benchmark of different players in terms of understanding what is their channel strategy, what kind of investments are they making, how are they executing it, and these best practices enabled our client to bring out an optimal channel mix and then prioritize the execution as well. Moving on, the one and the foremost pillar, I would say, regulatory compliance. Of course, a lot of, particularly for the importers and as well as the local players, it's very, very important to understand how the regulation is changing. Now, I remember one of our clients talking about, okay, we don't manufacture in the GCC region, but what is happening is that we are exporting there. But having said that, at times we do not keep a tab of the regulations that are changing or minute details of the requirements that are there for these specific product categories. So here what we have, how we have helped our client is by building and putting together a platform which tracks the regulatory nuances that are happening, the changes that are happening, the drafts that are coming up. And this platform also enables our client to streamline the compliance process. So whether an action has been taken or not, or if an action is due in next 2 months or so. So that kind of detail was also available. And of course, in terms of the platform, it also allowed our stakeholders to react to the regulatory change which is happening. So you can imagine this is a one-stop place for all the regulatory action that is happening, and how you as an how within your organization you can navigate through it. And last but not the least, it's very, very important to look at what the government initiatives are and what are the various incentives that the government is bringing. So, tracking the government-led programs, the subsidies and the incentives that they are putting together, and also engaging in public and private partnerships within this space. So here we have a very interesting example wherein one of our, we did this for a consultancy firm, wherein they were looking at benchmarking the government programs that are running across the GCC countries, and how, what are the best practices within these programs? What are those incentives? And across the value chain, from farmer to the food manufacturer to the institutions and so on and so forth, what are the different programs which are available? What are the different incentives that are available? And then this helped our client in understanding, creating a roadmap in terms of, adopting the best practices possibly that could be there. Now, these are some of the examples where we have supported our clients, and there could be many more solutions and customizations that we can do for this entire growth journey in Middle East. But yeah, that's all we have. But happy to hear your questions and take up your thoughts in the next 10 minutes or so.
Thank you so much, Dolly. That was very well described. Uh, so, we do have three questions that were already asked from us, from some of the registrants before the webinar. So I'll just come to that in a minute, but there is an interesting question in the chat window, in the Q&A window. And I think, Dolly, you are best positioned to answer that question because it's about innovations and launches and so on. So the question is, how are companies chasing innovations and launches and their success in the market? Sometime back we had done a whole webinar around this topic, around new product launches and so on. But what are you seeing, Dolly? And maybe some of this is local, but some of this is also global as a trend. How do we track innovations, and what is happening in the region as such?
Thanks, Ashish. So, how companies are chasing innovation, of course, very, very rigorously is what I would answer. And there's a lot happening within this space. So we already saw that, there's a lot of focus on plant-based, health-fortified food products. And it's very, very important to track these innovations, at the same time kind of monitor also the entire space, because here it's a mix of local players as well as global players who kind of bring in a lot of variety, a lot of innovation within this space. And to answer this, we also have a platform which kind of tracks these new launches and new innovations in the market, kind of categorize them. You can cut and slice the information in terms of what is happening and how successful they are in the market, in terms of, either the consumer reviews in positive direction associated with these innovations, or the increase in the number of similar kind of product categories or similar innovation once something has caught up. So really, and then of course, on top of it, at Benori, we also look at patent and scientific literature in terms of assessing what are the novel features that can come up within the food and beverage space, which is still brewing and has not yet reached the innovation, or not yet reached the market place. Yep.
Right, right. Dolly, you want to pick up one of the three questions that came to us earlier? So maybe you can just quickly talk about the question and then also answer
Yeah.
that.
I'll do that. So this one I found very interesting, wherein the question was around one of the import-driven category, the rice category, which is completely import driven. And the question was around, what are the opportunities there? Of course, we can do a full-fledged study on this, but with the paucity of time, a few things come up in my mind. One is, of course, expanding the specialty portfolio. So when I say specialty rice portfolio, it includes things like black rice. Now, black rice is something which is very, very rich in antioxidants, and and tying it back to the health consciousness of the consumer, this could be an avenue which can be looked into in terms of bringing something different, though we all know rice has its own connotation that diabetics cannot have it and so on and so forth. But this specialty rice segment could be interesting. And at the same time, looking at products that are something like a rice fortified meal or a ready to eat rice meal, the adjacent areas to raw rice, or that can also be explored within this space. So of course the avenues are many, and we can touch base separately on providing you with more details around the same.
Dolly, why don't you pick up another question from the remaining two questions, and then I have another interesting question in the chat window, but why don't you pick up the other question? Yeah.
Sure, Ashish. So the other question was on, what is the role of cloud kitchen and how has it transformed the F&B space, and has it allowed F&B outlets to reduce the operating costs in Middle East? So certainly we all know that there is a surgence in cloud kitchen post COVID, particularly wherein people are now more, used to ordering food using their mobile phones and so on and so forth. So of course, the cloud kitchens give you a leverage in terms of flexibility, smaller footprint in terms of space, right? Because they do not need a huge infrastructure in that sense. The cost impact, if I may talk about, there have been surveys which talk about that it is almost 39% more profitable than the traditional restaurants. But again, I would say there would be a fair balance between the sales that the cloud kitchens are making vis-a-vis the infrastructure cost and so on and so forth. Again, we can go into the depths of it overall, but overall, if I say yes, cloud kitchens are impacting the entire space, and somewhere they will create a much more bigger impact in the coming future.
So there is a question which has come up around sustainable packaging, and Benori and you and your team have done a bunch of work around that. But I will just come to that. There is one question which I think I can take up. Given the transformation in the sector, what are the biggest opportunities for growth? Um, so uh, I mean, this requires some analysis and so on because there are opportunities in every part of the value chain. The question is really around what are your core capabilities? What are you focused on? And from what prism are you looking at this as an industry? If you're looking at it as an investor, then clearly there are humongous opportunities right across the value chain, from infrastructure, warehousing, cold chains, logistics, transportation, manufacturing, innovation, in the retail segment, in the cloud segment, cloud kitchen segment, delivery segment, fine dining, restaurant segment, groceries, and so on. So clearly you will have to figure out where you can play the best as an investor. If you are an operator, and if you are a food manufacturer, uh, our sense is that the biggest opportunity lies in innovation. And ultimately the branding of your company, and the changes in brand perception that is happening, and the localization versus the import dynamic, the local private labels which are coming up. So the branding part of it, the innovation part of it, the customer sort of segmentation part of it, and all of those things are very important, and there are tons of opportunities all over the place. If you are a tech provider, then clearly there are again opportunities in various parts of the value chain. It could be from a IoT perspective, could be from a blockchain perspective, could be from a digital app perspective, and of course, use cases for AI, humongous use cases for AI around every aspect of this industry. So it really depends on from what is your play, what is your field that you have in front of you. And the sector is transforming, the opportunities are coming up, regulations are changing, government has incentive programs, customer behavior is changing. So this is ripe for grabbing opportunities overall. With that, we have a couple of minutes left only, Dolly. So could you answer this question around um, what is happening around sustainable packaging, and are consumers asking for it? How are companies dealing with it? What's happening with this whole single-use plastic policy that has been put into place?
Sure, Ashish. So again, this is certainly something that the government has taken up very seriously, and there is a vision in terms of reducing the single-use plastic. Uh, Players like retail chain players, they are making massive investments in terms of reducing the single-use plastic, going for alternatives like your paper-based packaging or your wood-based packaging, or wood-based cutlery, and so on and so forth. But again, what we are also seeing is a challenge in terms of implementing these practices across the value chain. So a plan has been created, a roadmap has been created that in next 2 years, this is what is going to be done. But how effective that entire plan is, that's where our clients are coming and asking for help as to this is what we planned, but we are not getting the right suppliers, we are not getting the right cost benefit, it's increasing our cost. So a lot of challenges being talked about still when it comes to implementing the sustainable packaging. But of course, we can look at technology providers who are coming up with smarter ways or smarter packaging material, which are sustainable, either biodegradable, and so on and so forth. You can look at in the neighboring region, what are the possibilities that are available, how has your competitors or peers in the market adopted the technology, and how have they achieved the benefits, or where have they reached, right? So again, we can go into the depths of this in terms of execute in terms of growing deeper into sustainable packaging, but certainly it is still an area of concern, because the implementation part is taking a toll on the companies, and that's my take on it.
Excellent. I think we are completely out of time now. So, as a summary, tons of opportunities, at the same time, tons of threats. And I think companies that are able to adapt to this change and grab the opportunities at the right time in the right way are going to be hugely successful in the future. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending. As you are exiting the webinar, a short feedback form would come up. Please do fill that out. It will only make us become better in the future. Thank you so much, and thank you, Dolly.
Thank you, Ashish. Thanks, everyone.